Applying for a job today kind of feels like throwing your resume into a black hole. So, how do you stand out and get noticed? That's exactly what we're talking about on this episode of Account Management Secrets with Carly Agar, a career coach who has helped countless account managers to land great roles. We break down the reality of the job market in 2025, why it's chaotic, what hiring managers really look for, and how to avoid the biggest job search mistakes. Carly also shares why spray and pray applications just don't work, how recruiters are filtering candidates in or out, and what you can do to cut through the noise. She also is calling out the worst job search advice out there and is giving you a better strategy instead. If you are wanting to take control of your career and get noticed for the right opportunities, if you're wanting to build a team of absolute A players, then this episode is for you. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Carly Agar. If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed, handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Hey, Carly, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Now, you are someone who does a lot of work with people who are trying to find roles, so find jobs as account managers or customer success managers. You've coached lots and lots of people through this process over a number of years. And about, I don't know, maybe six or 8 weeks ago, I put out a request to the Account Management Secrets community saying, what do you want to learn more about? Like, what do you want to hear more about? And one of the things that came through loud and clear was our audience saying, we want to know more about how to grow in our careers as account managers. We want to know how to navigate getting hired or finding new jobs. And so I'm really excited to jump into that with you today so that we can answer some of these big sticky questions that are out there for people.
Lots of sticky questions. It's funny because right before we pressed record, I was saying we're seeing so many more folks be intentional about career growth. And so it's very unsurprising to me that your community wants to hear, how can I do this? What's the right way? What's the best path? What am I not thinking about that I should be thinking about? So this will hopefully be a helpful conversation. I know I'll enjoy it, but I hope it's helpful for your community as well.
Yeah, and I think the point for someone who's listening, who's either looking for a job, considering a job change, or wondering where their career is going to take them is, we want to separate this conversation. And what you and I are going to do today, Carly, is we're going to talk about, yes, some tactical things around how to find a job and how to differentiate yourself and how to make sure that you give yourself the best shot to do that. And what we're also going to focus on, what's the bigger picture here? Like, what's the career arc or career trajectory for someone in account management? So listeners, I want you to be paying attention to both sides of this conversation. But Carly, if we could just kick off with, what in your view is the current lay of the land out there? So what's the job situation like for account managers? What are hiring companies looking for? Like, if you were to describe this and sum this up for us, like, what are things looking like in early 2025?
Yeah. If I was to give it one word, I would probably say chaotic, which maybe doesn't instill a ton of confidence in folks who are job seeking right now. But I mean, we all know that it's competitive, right? I don't need to say that. I think everybody who's looked for a job, or even if you haven't looked for a job, if you've been lucky enough to not have to look for a job in the last 3, almost 4 years now, then you already know how competitive things are. So I would say the landscape is that it's competitive. However, the good news is a competitive market just means we need to go about our job search differently. It doesn't mean that we can't look for jobs. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't voluntarily look for jobs. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't go after a new role just because things are competitive. And what I keep reminding my clients of is this is the new normal. So there's no, oh, I'm going to wait for the market to cool down, because we don't actually know if that will happen or when it will happen. It could be 10 years from now. So yes, things are competitive, a bit chaotic, but if you look at it from the right angle, which is how a lot of account managers have to think, is problem solving, adapting, right? If you think about it that way, you're going to be just fine. It'll be a little painful, of course, every job search is, but you'll get through it.
I was talking to one of our AMplify members the other day. So AMplify is the community that I run for account managers, and she told me that she was hiring for a mid-level position. So on her account management team, she's hiring for a mid-level position, and she had gotten over 1,100 applications for that one post. Now, I mean, so first of all, she did say, look, half of these are just kind of people clicking on LinkedIn and
Yes.
not doing any of the personalized stuff.
Yes.
But still, a whole bunch of people had gone through and created the right whatever she wanted, artifacts or cover letter or whatever, and had it somewhat personalized. And so she was still looking at over 200 potential applicants for this job who had done the right amount of effort to get through that at least first gate. And I thought to myself, man, that's an overwhelming thing to do, is to look through that number of applications. So yes, it's tough out there, and the tools like LinkedIn and one-click apply and all these applicant tracking systems and so on have made it so easy to apply for some roles. That's not going to help you necessarily if you're looking for a job. Like, this is not a spray and pray. I assume what you're going to say is spray and pray is not the right approach here if you're out there looking for a job, knowing how chaotic it is.
Yes, I would have to agree with that wholeheartedly. But I'll explain why, because I do think that job seeking in general, especially in our space, in the account management space, there is, even though it's a pretty small community, all things considered, there is a lot of advice out there. And to be frank, some of it is just really bad advice.
Ooh, tell us the advice that we're getting that's wrong.
When it comes to spraying and praying, there's a couple of things that make that a bad strategy. Number one is when we think about new tools, new technology, specifically AI, there's a lot of tools popping up now that will automatically apply to lots of jobs on your behalf. So I think Ladders is one of them that comes to mind. You go in, you input your resume, you answer a couple of questions, and then it just applies to jobs for you. The problem with that is, so I'll give some context behind this. Something that my team takes really seriously is research. So we interview hiring managers, recruiters all the time to figure out, what are you actually doing when you are assessing candidates? And all of our data from all of these interviews suggests that every hiring team that we've spoken to has had to create new filters for when they go through piles of resumes, piles of candidates. And specifically, something that they are now looking for when they are considering, is this person getting an interview or not, is, do I feel like this candidate really wants to work at our company? Do I feel like they are going to be an evangelist for our product, for our mission, for our customers? And that's new, right? If you were to ask hiring managers, recruiters 2 years ago if they cared about that, they might say, yeah, that of course we want people who want to work here, but we're not looking for that when we're going through our ATS. But now that's a real filter that they have to use, because when you have more applications, you need more criteria to dwindle the list down. So getting back to what I was saying about auto applying to a bunch of roles, recruiters can see oftentimes, in most cases, that your application came from one of those tools. So it'll say like source ladders to Indeed. Now, they don't care that you applied it on Indeed. They don't care if you apply on LinkedIn. They don't care if you apply on Wellfound. That does not matter to them. The only reason they look at that data is to figure out where they should post jobs. But if it says from ladders to LinkedIn, then they're thinking, oh, this person did not put any intention behind this application. And while they might be super excited to work here, they're not showing that to me. So I'm going to go pick a candidate who does seem a little bit more excited. So that's one reason why spray and pray just does not do anything to help you.
And the default, of course, I just want to remind everyone here, the default is for them to say no, like you're not getting interviews. So default, you're not on the list. And so if you're not giving them a good reason to put you on the list, they're just going to say, oh, this looks like a lazy applicant because they came through one of these mass tools. So I'm not even going to bother. So this is what we need to be addressing is how do we stand out? And what you're saying is you put in research, you figure out, is this the right opportunity for you? Is this the right company for you? Are you excited about it? Does it get your energy up? And then go do your application. So basically my guess is your advice is find a smaller number of jobs that you're better suited for and that you're more excited about rather than playing the numbers game.
Absolutely. And I would go even one step further to think about how can you approach your job search like you would approach your book of business as an account manager? You're going to put the highest amount of effort, the most engagement, the most research, the most personalization towards your biggest customers, your biggest opportunity. And you're going to put slightly less effort, slightly less personalization, maybe a little bit more automation for your customers who are paying you less or have less growth opportunity. I would say the best job search strategy, because we have to be realistic, not everyone has the time to put in all that effort for every application, is treating applications the same way. So have your tier 1 applications where these are your dream jobs, right? They check all your boxes and then some. Be very intentional about those. It's okay to apply to jobs, to a high volume of jobs, if they're your tier 3 jobs. They're not the ones that you're dying to get.
Like a safety school in a college application.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, all right. So question for you on this. You just talked about dream jobs. So what's your advice for someone early career, mid-career, and they view this as a job, not a calling, let's say, right? So like it's a job. What's your coach? And I know you've coached something like 800 CSMs and account managers to get jobs or something like that. You've done you have a lot of experience here. So you've coached a lot of people through this process.
Yes.
How do you help people just uncover, like, what do I want to do in my life? What does my dream job look like? How will I know when something ticks all these boxes? Like, do you have an exercise and a program for this?
I love this question. I have a couple of different angles that I would approach this from. So one, I'll start with just the intentional career growth path, which is I want to look for a new job. I want to grow my career, meaning I want to make more money. I want to get bigger titles, more responsibility. How can I be intentional about that? And there's 2 different ways you can think about that. So one is we actually have a lot of data that suggests that the highest paid account managers today, so in 2025, have a well-rounded resume. So what I mean by that is they have a blend of startup and big corporate experience. They have experience in roles where they managed lots of commercials, and they have experience in roles where they did not manage a lot of commercials. So renewals, expansions. They also have experience with big customers, with small customers, and they have experience across different industries. So maybe you moved from marketing tech to cybersecurity to fintech, I'm just kind of making that example up. But there is an argument to be made that creating a well-rounded resume for yourself, so rounding out your experience, can lead to becoming a very high paid account manager, if that's what your goal is, right? There is also data that suggests that once you get a little bit further in your career, you can make even more money if you specialize in an industry. So if I have kind of jumped around a little bit from industry to industry, I end up in cybersecurity. There is an argument to be made for staying with that industry. But I would not suggest that to anyone unless you love that industry and you feel really good about where the industry as a whole is going. So that's a couple of things to keep in mind. That's for the person that considers career growth to be money titles, which, by the way, is totally fine. I think that's great. Then there's another path that I might take with this conversation if I was working with a client that is, well, if you aren't chasing money, you aren't chasing titles, it's safe to assume that you're chasing, not to be super cliche, but happiness at work, which is also a great goal to have. And in that case, I always encourage folks, this is the simplest exercise you could ever do. I still to this day do this. I've been doing it for, I don't even know how long, 6 years maybe. I keep a notepad on my desk or a piece of paper, and I have 2 columns. One says stuff I like doing, and the other one says stuff I don't like doing. And when you're at work in your day-to-day, write down what's giving you energy, what's sucking the energy out of you, what's making you look forward to a certain day, what's making you dread a certain day. What is it on your calendar that you have to do that day that you're just like, I don't want to get out of bed tomorrow for that reason. And if you do that for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, you're going to learn a lot about the things that you are good at and the things that really bring you joy at work. And that can tell you so much more about what your quote unquote dream job is than any other tool or method or exercise.
Great. Yeah, that's really a neat one. Reminds me, I was coaching one of our AMplify members last week, and she and I were talking about this exact thing. Like she finds herself doing a lot of kind of admin tasks and customer support type tasks and things that really weren't part of her where she wanted to go. And she was having a hard time talking to her boss and her team about that. And so what I told her was, hey, go back and look at your calendar for the last month and color code. So in this case, it wasn't so much what gives you energy versus what doesn't, but it was color code the things that you think are like strategic and meaningful in helping you move your job forward versus the things that are admin and internally focused and not really a good use of your time. So it wasn't so much in terms of like, is she going to go find a new job or not? But it was more, how can you make sure that within your job, you're doing more of the things that you like and are good at and are beneficial for the business and less of all this other stuff. Yeah. And the cool thing was she went and did this and then shared it with her boss. And then I think the boss now asked the entire team to do this same exercise so that they can figure out how to offload some of these lower value tasks. Because, in the account management world, I want to be doing, right? Like a lot of people are attracted to this because they say, hey, I like people. I like solving big problems. I like negotiating with customers. And, I like kind of being in front of them and being their partner. I don't like looking through spreadsheets, doing CRM data entry, wrangling with my internal team over whatever thing or issue, stuff like that. And so the more clarity I can have, to your point, the more clarity I can have over what gives me energy or what sucks energy from me, then the better off I will be. And then the more specific things I can, like the flags I can look for in an opportunity or in an application, right?
Yeah, I love the exercise you just described because, it fits the theme of career growth. We haven't yet tackled this topic yet, but that's a really easy way to make an impact internally if you are someone who's eyeing a promotion or think you might be eyeing a promotion soon, I mean, that is the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to making an impact. You have to do it the right way, right? I would not suggest bringing your calendar to your manager and saying, there's a problem. I'm spending too much time on stuff I don't like doing. But just doing a time audit and then maybe bringing in the team and auditing their time and just creating awareness around inefficiencies on the team is seriously one of the easiest ways to make an impact, especially because when you think about account management right now, just as an industry, as an organization, every single team right now is asking the question, how do we scale? So if you're creating awareness, if you're being that observer and reporter internally around inefficiencies, you're contributing to something they care about, which is becoming more efficient.
Well, let's go there. Let's have that as part of the conversation. You know, a lot of people, they think the grass is greener, and they think, oh, you know, I don't like my current job. I'm going to go find a new job. I need to go somewhere. And that's not always the case, because sometimes you need to get better at your current job, or you need to find existing opportunities, or you need to chart a path for yourself, you know, either vertically, so meaning I'm going to get more senior, or horizontally, I'm going to go do something else inside of the same company. And of course, in you know, some kind of volatile economic environment, or if the unemployment rate is staying a little bit higher than people want, or if it really is a buyer's market where when it comes to talent as opposed to a seller's market, there's a lot of good reasons to stay at the company that you're at. Walk us through a framework, or help us think about, you know, what are the things that I can do to amplify my impact as an account manager? How can I get better at my job? How can I get the recognition I deserve? How can I open up career opportunities for me if I decide to stay?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite conversations to have, because it's something that we all want, right? Every single person wants to feel valued at work. They want to feel like their impact is being seen and being recognized. They want to get promoted. They want new opportunities. But there's not a lot of advice out there as to how to actually do that. Like, what does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? So I would say one of the very first steps to just ensuring that you're making an impact is creating champions in your organization. As account managers, you know how to create a champion. I'm not going to tell you what a champion is. You already know. But we spend so much time and energy creating champions in our accounts, and then we don't realize, wait a second. If I want something internally, I need champions who are going to advocate for me. So one of the first steps, one of the easiest steps that so many people skip, is just go talk to decision makers at your company. Put one-on-ones on their calendar, reach out to their assistants, ask them for time, pick their brains, ask them questions, let them know you're thinking about career growth, ask if they have any advice. Leaders are going to appreciate that. They're going to respect that. And even if it feels awkward and uncomfortable at first, like, it's one of those things where you just have to do it anyway.
Including, it sounds like, requesting or finding mentors.
Yep. People tend to complicate finding a mentor. Like, it has to be this super formal arrangement, and it's really awkward, and it has to
be my soulmate mentor.
Yeah. That maybe it's just how I operate, because I'm not the most professional, and I don't like things that are very formal. I'm just very laid back and organic and whatever. But for me, I think a lot of people overcomplicate it. They build it up in their heads to be this big formal thing. Finding a mentor could be as easy as spotting someone in your organization, or maybe not in your organization, that you look up to. Maybe it's because they're an awesome negotiator, and that's a skill you know you need to work on. Maybe it's because they are a CCO, and that's a title that you want to work your way up to. Maybe it's just someone that you like. I mean, it doesn't have to be the most formal checklist of criteria. And I would say for that person to become your mentor, you just have to nurture the relationship. You don't have to formally ask them to be your mentor. You could let them know that you think of them as a mentor, and that could create a good shift in the relationship. But it's really just about creating time and space for you to be around them, whether that's one-on-one or just having the opportunity to see them in action. That's great mentorship. That's better than nothing.
So we don't need to overcomplicate it.
Exactly.
We don't need to be, it doesn't need to be hyper formal. We're not asking them out on a date.
Mm-hmm.
We're simply saying, we're simply finding opportunities, like you said, to create champions for ourselves internally or to find a mentor. And the reason I think this is important, and the reason I want people listening to consider this very, very seriously, is we know that account managers fly under the radar. Mm-hmm. Under the radar is not a good place to be in a corporate environment. So when I say, which I say a lot, that account managers are the unsung heroes of their companies, that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, we don't want to be doing all this work and not get recognition and not get rewards and not get praise. And through doing what Carly is suggesting here of finding internal champions and other mentors for ourselves, we're raising our profile, we're raising the profile of the team, and we're educating the rest of the company about what is it that account managers actually do. Mm-hmm. Because that's also kind of a black box for a lot of people. Yeah. And so there's multiple benefits here. There's benefit to you in terms of, tapping into different centers of support and meeting interesting people inside of the company. But then more broadly, there's a benefit to all of us because you're elevating, if you will, the perception of account managers within the company. And that, of course, then finds us more opportunities, not just for growth, but also for the resources that we need to do our jobs and stuff like that too, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And step one to all of that is these people just need to know you exist, right? You can't talk about all the great things you've done and prove your impact and show, this big change you're making or how much you're contributing if they don't know you. So step one, and that's another, we overcomplicate it. How do I get promoted? How do I make sure leadership knows what I'm doing and how great I am? Well, first, they just need to know you as a person. So go talk to them. Step two, I would say, and you kind of touched on this, which is almost like raising the perception of you or changing the perception of you. And oftentimes what we're trying to do is make sure that perception is really positive, right? Like, I'm making such an impact. I think what a lot of people assume is account management is such a KPI driven role. So they think, as long as I'm hitting my KPIs, maybe even exceeding my KPIs, leadership will notice. And yes, they're going to notice, but KPIs, you are expected to hit and exceed your KPIs, right? So you're not getting promoted because of that. But one thing you can do as an account manager, and I think that we're so lucky in this role because it is so easy to show our impact compared to other roles in the organization, is pick some metric about your book of business that isn't currently a KPI. So maybe it's the health of your book of business if you're using health scores. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're being encouraged to use health scores, but maybe you're not being measured on it. Okay. Start tracking that quarter over quarter. Now you have a data point that all the other account managers on the team don't have, that you can say, look, my book of business went from, I don't know, I'm making this up, 70% healthy back in 2023, and now it's at 98% healthy. You can see the impact. Here's the data to prove it. That's a really easy way. It's just tracking data, telling stories with data.
Yeah, I mean that's a really important skill is controlling the narrative that you want to share, shaping the narrative, right? Yeah, and that's part of the leadership track. If someone is on that, is to get good at that, get good at telling the story, get good at presenting all this information so that you can influence them, so that you can get to some kind of outcome. What we don't want to do is we don't want account managers and CSMs to just be stuck, in this reactive mode, just doing whatever they get told or whatever is their KPI or their OKR or whatever it is, versus proactively taking steps. And I think
Mm-hmm.
an underlying theme to the discussion here today is people being proactive with their careers as opposed to kind of being more laid back or reactive about it. And if you do want to be proactive, which I assume you do because that's why you're listening to this podcast, then a big part of that is being intentional about what you like. It's about finding the mentors or finding other people to influence. And it's about then shaping the narrative of the story that you're telling, because then that's something, it's funny. You said, think about this just like how you think about managing accounts. So one of the things that we always talk about for account managers is like, what does your customer say when you're not in the room? You want to plant things in their head so that they are saying those about you even when you're not there. Well, guess what? You want to do the exact same thing for your boss and their boss and their boss and other people inside, other stakeholders, so that they're talking about you in the way that you want to be talked about.
Yes. You want your customer to renew. So what do? Talk about ROI, show them the impact. Same thing. If you want, not that your employment contract is up for renewal, but same idea, right? In some cases, unfortunately, that actually is
sometimes
a reality.
You do get reviewed and find yourself on the wrong side of a line. Yeah.
It's no different. And it might feel weird I'm not deducing people to products, but sometimes just thinking about it that way, it's like, oh yeah, I am overcomplicating this. I need champions in my org. I need to show my impact, talk about my ROI, do it often, right? No different than what you're doing day to day in your role. You just need to do it for yourself.
And so what are the likely paths here for account managers? So let's say I'm an individual account manager, kind of early career, but I'm hitting all my goals. I'm making an impact. I'm out there. What sort of arc do they see in front of themselves?
Yeah. So I think the obvious path that most people think about when they think about account management is moving up to bigger, more strategic accounts. So we're talking about, a scaled role to mid-market, to enterprise, to strategic or principal. And then there's another obvious path, which is moving up to leadership. Interestingly, what I've seen and heard, and I'm curious actually if you've seen and heard the same, is I'm hearing more and more people are questioning if those are paths that they want to take. So in other words, instead of just saying, well, this is the path that's laid out in front of me, that I guess that's what I'm going after, people are really taking the time to think, wait a second, do I want to lead a team? Is that actually something that I would enjoy doing, instead of just kind of following the path that's there?
Yeah. I've definitely heard that too. And there are people who say, you know what, I prefer to be closer to the customer. I prefer to be an individual contributor. I don't want to be in a team manager role. And I think that's totally fine. I've seen people who are well advanced in their career who still prefer to be, at the face of the business as opposed to running a team. And that's going to be, I think at least that's going to be kind of a personal preference. I will say that for account managers, one of the biggest ways to majorly amplify your impact and, by the way, your comp is to start running the strategic accounts. Yeah. Because you almost become like the mini CEO of that account. And if it's a, $1, $5, $10, $50 million customer, which they can be, you find yourself in a whole, like basically running a P&L and running a business and running a very serious part of an organization. And that can be really, really satisfying for people. So in big industrial companies, like the key accounts, the really small number of absolutely gigantic accounts, those are positions of big responsibility, big budgets, big compensation, and obviously tremendous learning also for you, because you're seeing almost every single part of a business. If you're managing a $50 million account, you're seeing every single part of your company.
I'm having like these very vivid flashbacks to when I was at my 9-to-5 before I left. And I was in this mindset of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with my life. I knew at the time I did not want to become a leader of a CS team. It's just the day-to-day of the role was not what I was interested in doing. And I remember I was working with, it was a partner of ours. I want to say they worked at Snowflake. So big established company. And the rep I was talking to was principal strategic AM. I don't remember his exact title, but he was the highest level individual contributor. He worked on one account. I'm just making this up. Let's say it's Walmart. It was a really big company like Walmart. And I remember I was picking his brain about his job because he was like, it's the freaking best. I've been working with this client for 7 years. These people are like my family. I know their business inside and out. It's so comfortable. There's nothing I really need to worry about because the transparency is there. The trust is there. All I have to do is just keep executing on this one account, finding more ways for them to use Snowflake or whatever the product was. And I'm crushing it. And he was probably making like $250K as an IC. So there's a lot to be said about being an individual contributor and loving that and that being enough. You don't always have to move into leadership.
I remember at an old company that I was at a long time ago, the guy who ran our one single biggest customer one year got $1 million commission check.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like, and then this was 20 years ago. So it's worth a lot more. That would be $2 million today. And the point is, if you're chasing or if you're motivated by those levels of compensation, then getting into the strategic account game can really change things for you in a good way.
Totally.
Now, couple things that I'd love to make sure that I'm understanding better here. One is when you're talking to companies about their hiring strategies for account managers, one of the things that always comes up is what's the skills profile, right? Like what are they looking for in people? And I don't look at resumes or CVs very often, but every once in a while, someone will send me one to take a look at, or read a job posting, and I always super crack up when I see the basic skills on there. Like I'm proficient in Microsoft Word,
communication.
Yes, and it's like whoa, and I think, boy, that's really not the best way to be advertising this stuff. What are the skills gaps that account management teams are looking to fill? Like if you look at it today, what are their urgent ones? So another way to think about this is if I were positioning myself as a potential team member, how would I differentiate? What do I want to overemphasize and lean into versus maybe spend a little bit less time differentiating myself on?
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out. I would say negotiation skills are huge. Just being able to own the full cycle of a deal from start to finish without a lot of management intervention. So if we're talking about moving up to strategic accounts, enterprise accounts, are you negotiating that entire deal? Not just having the negotiation conversation, but are you owning that full negotiation from end to end? That is a skill that is, I think it's always been highly valued, but something that a lot of teams are lacking right now. So that's extremely valuable. If you can talk about how you multi-thread for your deals and you establish relationships with procurement teams and you're very mindful of budget cycles and decision makers and all of the things that you should be doing as an account manager, they are going to value that over something like you said, Excel skills. I wouldn't even put that on the same, even near the same level. Yeah. But I would say that is something that is widely missing from a lot of teams.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I'll tell you why. We run a course at AMplify called Negotiating Renewals and Upsells Like a Boss.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like we rehearsed this, but we did not.
It's true. We did not rehearse this, but I totally agree with you. And I would go a step further. And if I were answering my own question, I would say the best way to differentiate yourself is show them that you think like a CEO about your accounts.
Yes.
Full picture, full breadth. Like nobody wants to hear that's not my job, right? Nobody wants to hear, oh, I'm not comfortable with the money part, right? Like that is not going to get you hired, people. That's not the way to do it. If you have the right level of business acumen, You think like a CEO about your account. You say, here's how I'm going to guide them into the future. I'm going to be responsible for the end to end. I'm going to find the resources and solve problems when they arise, etc. That is the kind of thing. If I were a hiring manager, I'd be like, oh, this is someone I want on my team.
I'm so glad you said that. I talked a little bit about this before, but we conduct interviews with hiring managers to ask them, what do you look for? What does your process look like? And something that a lot of hiring managers in this last round of interviews we just did said exactly what you just said, which is, I want to know, now this was answered in a way that was more specific to how do you pick candidates from basically a pile of resumes. And they said, if you can show me that you approach your book of business with complete ownership over what's happening with those accounts, I want you on my team. I don't care what kind of domain experience you have. I don't care if you have no domain experience. I don't even really care if you've done this exact job before. But if you can prove to me through the interview process that you will own your book of business, I want you on my team. Which makes a ton of sense, because if you think about it from their perspective, of course they want someone that's going to own their book of business, because that makes their life so much easier.
That's the answer, everybody. You want complete ownership over your book of business. You want to be proactive in steering your career and in guiding your customers. If you do that, you will rise to the top of consideration, right? You will certainly be considered if you show up with that kind of energy. I think that is the nugget of gold right there, in terms of how account managers can be thinking about this. Carly, as we wrap up, one question here that I know is on a lot of people's minds. So we're all seeing the global tsunami of change of AI and sitting there thinking, boy, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? How do I know? How do I tell the difference? A lot of account managers, and in fact, a lot of professionals, period, are concerned that, because AI is getting better, there's more use cases, there's more things that it's doing. Maybe I don't need as many AMs next year. Maybe my hiring needs have changed. Maybe my team sizes are shrinking. What are you seeing about that? What's your advice to people trying to figure out how the humans play into this kind of wave of technology change?
My opinion is that account managers are never going away. AI cannot replace everything account managers do. If you're really nervous about AI taking over your job, I would say the thing that you fear the most is the thing that you should be running the fastest towards, not away from. So I know that if I was in an account manager seat right now and I was nervous about all these conversations about AI, rest assured, I would be spending all of my free time figuring out how to be an expert in using AI for account management. And I would be like, quote unquote, first to market. I'm an expert in this. So, hey, yeah, I can come join your account management team and I'll spin up the AI strategy. So I would be volunteering for everything that AI touches. I would be doing my own research. I'd be figuring out how other teams who are further along in using AI are doing it right now. How can I replicate that? I'd be making suggestions on how AI can replace some of the things that we're doing. Like, I would just become the thought leader in it, as opposed to running away from it and being scared of it.
Great. I mean, we're what you're saying in all this stuff is like, help solve problems that your company has.
Exactly.
Don't create problems, go solve problems. That's the route to getting hired here.
Yes, it's going to drastically change the way every aspect of a business operates, and change equals gaps, right? There's going to be gaps in knowledge. How do we do this? Who does this? What's the right way? What tools do we use? So start filling those gaps and you will become so valuable. You'll become even more valuable than you are right now.
Well, thank you for plugging some of my personal gaps in my thinking around about career growth for account managers. So It's nice for me to be able to understand this and to see more nuance here. And, for me, the key takeaways were to be really intentional if you're looking for a job, why you're looking for a job, what lights you up. If you're contemplating a career move inside your company, again, what lights you up and what doesn't. How can I find champions and mentors to raise my profile and to make the case for me, even when I'm not in the room, and do what it takes to claim ownership of a problem. The problem could be AI, like you just said, or the problem could be how you're going to run your accounts and get maximum value to them, for example.
Yes.
So do everything that you can to solve problems. That is the way to get hired and to set yourself up for a stellar career. Thanks so much, Carly Agar, for joining me here on Account Management Secrets to dig into this. This was a great conversation.
Thanks, Alex, for having me.